Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I am Dr. Muzammil from Medical Unit 5. Today we will discuss a very important topic and very relevant to the exam is infective endocarditis. So what is the definition? It is basically an microbial infection of a heart valve, maybe native or prosthetic, the lining of the cardiac chamber, a blood vessel or a congenital anomaly. Initiating even resulting in infective endocarditis is turbulent blood flow, bacteremia, and the characteristic lesion found in infective endocarditis is vegetations. We will discuss in next slides about the pathophysiology and what happens, how these vegetations are being formed. So vegetation is a mass of platelet, fibrin, then microcolonies of microorganisms and inflammatory cells. You can see in this picture showing Viridin streptococcal endocarditis involving the mitral valve. So because of turbulent blood flow, there is a platelet plug formation which consists of platelet, fibrin and inflammatory cells that is later on invaded by the microorganisms, resulting in vegetation formation and destruction of the underlying cardiac tissue. They may become large enough to cause obstruction, and they may break to form emboli, and if the cusp perforation or the caudal tendon rupture, then it results in valve regurgitation. Usually maybe clinical course acute or subacute. First we will discuss about acute endocarditis. If the duration is of few days to few weeks, we will label it as acute event, usually caused by Staph aureus. Severe febrile illness with prominent and changing heart murmurs and petechiae. It may emboli, resulting in cardiac or renal failure may also develop rapidly in acute phase. Abscesses may be detected on echocardiography. Partially treated acute endocarditis behaves like subacute endocarditis. We will discuss in the next slide. So if the duration is of few weeks to months, uh, it is called subacute one, and usually valve is already damaged. For example, because of congenital heart disease or valvular heart disease. And the features of subacute endocarditis are persistent fever, unusual tiredness, night sweats, weight loss, splenomegaly. What are the sites of vegetations? Infection most commonly involves heart valves, native or prosthetic, and the low pressure side of the ventricular septum at the site of a defect especially, and then mural endocardium, intracardiac devices, AV shunts and atrioarterial shunts, for example PDA, and coaptation of aorta. Viridins group of Streptococci are the most common organism involved in subacute endocarditis, followed by Enterococcus faecalis. Streptococcus bovis originates from the gastrointestinal tract where it is associated with polyps and colonic tumors. And Enterococci enter the bloodstream from the genitourinary tracts. But the Viridins group of Streptococcus is the most common one, which may involve mitis and sanguis both. They have a close link to the oral cavity infection. Talking about Staph aureus is a common cause of acute endocarditis. It originates from skin infections, abscesses, or vascular ascites, for example, IV or central lines, or from IV drug abusers. And the Streptococcus pneumonia and the Streptococcus pyogenes, they may also be involved. Then polymicrobial endocarditis is more common among injection drug users than among patients who do not inject drugs. then post-operative endocarditis, usually after cardiac surgery especially. In Q fever endocarditis due to Coxiella burnetii, but here a history of contact with the farm animals should be there. Then the gram-negative bacteria, Hessic organisms, which involve the respiratory tract, can also cause endocarditis. And H is for Haemophilus species, A is for Actinobacillus, Actinomycetum and comitans, C is for Cardiobacterium hominis, E is for Echinella and Kingella sheep. Brucella is also involved in endocarditis, but here there should be a history of contact with goats or cattle. Yeast and fungus like Candida aspergillus can also cause endocarditis. This is again the repetition almost of the same organism we have discussed already. What are the predisposing conditions associated with increased risk of endocarditis? More commonly, mitral valve prolapse with murmur, degenerative valvular disease, IV drug use, prosthetic valves, and congenital abnormalities, valvular or septal both. And less common are rheumatic heart disease, hypertrophic obstructive cardiomyopathy, pulmonary systemic shunts, coarctation of aorta, previous endocarditis, and complex cyanotic congenital heart disease. There is another term is meningitic endocarditis. It is basically if the patient has a malignancy or having a chronic disease, there might be vegetation, and that is a non-infective one. It's called meningitic endocarditis. And also in a systemic lupus erythematosus, antiphospholipid antibody syndrome, there may be vegetations that are again non-infective, which is called as Libman-Sack endocarditis. As we discussed in the first slide, that there is a pre-existing endocardial damage, like site of impact of high velocity blood jets or low pressure site of cardiac structural lesion, such as septum of the heart, development of uninfected platelet fibrin thrombus, NBTE. NBTE also arises as a result of hypercoagulable states. Organisms that cause endocarditis generally enter the bloodstream from mucosal surfaces, the skin, or sites of focal infection, and followed by attachment of bacteria to site of this thrombus, formation of vegetations, destruction of the underlying valve. Vegetations may become large enough to cause obstruction. They may also break away as emboli. Tissue damages occurs and abscesses may form. Valve regurgitation may develop or increase if the affected valve is damaged by tissue distortion, cusp perforation, or disruption of coordinate. The cardiac conditions most commonly resulting in non-bacterial thrombotic endocarditis are mitral regurgitation, aortic stenosis, aortic regurgitation, ventricular septal defects, and complex congenital heart disease. Infection with virulent organism, for example Staph aureus, can cause endocarditis in a previously normal heart valves even. Many acquired and congenital cardiac lesions are vulnerable to endocarditis. Extracardiac manifestations that includes vasculitis and skin lesions are due to emboli or immune complex deposition. Then mycotic aneurysms may develop in arteries at the site of infected emboli. The incidence of infective endocarditis in community is community based. Studies ranges from 2 to 5 cases per 1 lakh per annum. It varies with geography. Talking about the clinical features, from the most common to least common is the fever, chills, sweats, anorexia, weight loss, malaise, myalgias, arthalgias, backache, hard murmur, new or worsening regurgitant murmur, emboli, especially arterial, splenomegaly, clubbing, neurological manifestations, peripheral manifestations like ocular nodes, sublingual hemorrhages, Jane-Williams, Roth spots, and fatigue. We will discuss these peripheral manifestations in the next slides as well. Now, what will be in the labs? We may have anemia, leukocytosis, we may have microscopic hematuria, raised CRP, ESR, RA factor may be positive. We may have circulating immune complexes and serum complement will be low. What embolic phenomena we can have? We can have stroke, we can have peripheral arterial embolism, purpura and petechial hemorrhages in the skin and mucous membranes. And what about vasculitis? We may have splinter hemorrhages under the fingernails or toenails. Ocular nodes are painful tender swellings at the fingertips that are probably the product of vasculitis and they are rare. We may have digital clubbing, which is a late sign usually. We can have immune complex mediated microscopic hematuria as well. And microscopic hematuria may also be due to embolic phenomena as well. So post-operative endocarditis, any unexplained fever in a patient who has had heart valve surgery should be investigated for possible endocarditis. Coagulase negative staphylococcus usually is responsible, that was introduced during the perioperative period. Usually, we have a picture of Jane-Williams. You may have a rock spot, fundoscopy, and splinter hemorrhages due to vasculitis under the nail surface. You see petechial subconjunctival hemorrhages, poor dentation, and clubbing. So again, repetition of the same as we discussed. Clinical signs. Talking about the cardiac manifestations, new regurgitant murmurs, congestive heart failure, perivalvular abscesses, fistula from root of aorta into cardiac chambers or between cardiac chambers. Abscesses may grow from the aortic valve annulus through the epicardium causing pericarditis. Varying degree of heart block. Emboli to a coronary artery may result in myocardial infarction. And non-cardiac, as we discussed, symptomatic emboli that cause sublingual hemorrhages, ocular nodes, non-specific inflammatory arthritis, and backache. Then emboli can cause, if the vegetation is more than 10 mm and located in mitral valve, they are most likely to embolize. That may result in embolic stroke, aseptic or purulent meningitis, intracardiac hemorrhage due to hemorrhagic infarctions or ruptured myocardial aneurysms. You may have seizures and encephalopathies. And microabscesses in the brain and meninges occurs commonly in Staph aureus endocarditis. Immune complex deposition on the glomerular basement membrane causes diffuse hypocomplementemic glomerulonephritis and renal dysfunction. Embolic renal infarction causes flank pain and hematuria. So how we will diagnose? There are criteria to be defined by Duke, which is called modified Duke's criteria. A clinical diagnosis of endocarditis can be made on the presence of 2 major, 1 major, 3 minor or 5 minor criteria. We will discuss in the next slides. You should remember all these on fingertips. Talking about the major criteria. You should have a positive blood culture and endocardial involvement on echocardiography. So, positive blood culture, typical organism from two cultures. Persistent positive blood cultures taken 12 hours apart and 3 or more positive blood cultures taken over more than 1 hour. Any one of these will be labeled as major criteria of positive blood culture. And if there is an endocardial involvement, findings of vegetations, or there is a new valvular regurgitation on echocardiography. These both are major criteria. Minor criteria: predisposing valvular or cardiac abnormalities, IV drug misuse, fever more than 38 degrees centigrade, embolic phenomena may be major arterial emboli, septic pulmonary infarcts, myocardic aneurysms, intracranial hemorrhages, conjunctival hemorrhages, and Janeway lesions. You may have vascular phenomena, glomerulonephritis, ossular nodes, rock spots, rheumatoid factor. Blood culture suggestive of organism grown but not achieving major criteria, and the suggestive echocardiographic findings but not typical. So these are the minor criteria. So if we have a two major, fine, we have a definite endocarditis. If we have one major, there should be three minors, or we have a five minors. This diagnosis is definite. And if one major and one minor, or there is three minor, then there is a possibility of endocarditis. So again, talking about blood culture, in the absence of a prior antibiotic therapy, 3 blood culture sets with 2 bottles per set, separated from each other by at least 1 hour, should be obtained from different venipuncture sites over 24 hours. Talking about echocardiography, transthoracic and transesophageal, transthoracic echocardiography (TTE) has a sensitivity of 65%. It cannot image vegetations if they are less than 2 mm in diameter. 20% of patients, it is technically inadequate because of emphysema or body habitus, thick chest. But the transesophageal echocardiography has a sensitivity of 90%, and it's optimal method for the diagnosis of prosthetic endocarditis, the detection of the myocardial abscesses, valve perforations, and intracardiac fistula. So if the facility is available, for confirmation, we should go for transesophageal echocardiography, which is also called as T. So it is difficult to understand. Just for an academic point of view, we have a mitral valve vegetation view, but you should not be confused about it. Again, so if we fail to detect vegetation, it does not exclude the diagnosis of infective endocarditis and should not delay treatment. Then comes the routine serological investigations, CBC, which is called complete blood count, erythrocyte sedimentation rate, usually elevated, and a normocytic normochromic anemia may be there. There may be leukocytosis, which is common, and thrombocytopenia may be present. Then the CRP is more reliable than the ESR in monitoring progress. Proteinuria may be there, and microscopic hematuria is usually present. ECG may show the development of arterioventricular blocks due to abscess formation, occasionally infarction due to emboli. Chest X-ray may show evidence of cardiac failure or cardiomegaly if we are having a doubt about heart failure. Then comes the management. Any source of infection should be removed as soon as possible. For example, a tooth with the apical abscess should be extracted. Empirical treatment after sending blood culture should be started. In acute endocarditis, flucloxacin and gentamicin are recommended. But in subacute or indolent presentation, benzyl penicillin and gentamicin can be given. And in those who have a penicillin allergy, a prosthetic valve, or a suspected methicillin-resistant Staph aureus (MRSA) infection, triple therapy with vancomycin, gentamicin, and oral rifampicin should be considered. Minimum inhibitory concentration is essential to guide antibiotic therapy. Then we have antibiotic treatment for an infective endocarditis caused by organism. It is organism wise. When you have a blood culture, you have confirmed your organism, you can prescribe medication accordingly. So if the streptococci are involved and penicillin is susceptible, then you can give penicillin G 2 to 3 million units IV over 4 hourly for 4 weeks. Then ceftriaxone 2 gram daily IV as a single dose for 4 weeks. Then vancomycin 15 milligram per kg IV or BD for 4 weeks. Then penicillin G or ceftriaxone for 2 weeks plus gentamicin. Dose of gentamicin is 3 milligram per kg QID IV or IM as a single dose or divided into equal doses 8 hourly for 2 weeks. If the culture shows a relatively penicillin resistant streptococci, then you can go for penicillin G, ceftriaxone plus gentamicin. And vancomycin as noted above for 4 weeks. But if there is a moderate penicillin resistant streptococci, nutritionally variant organisms or Gemella morgellori species is involved, then we can again have penicillin G or we can have a ceftriaxone plus gentamicin combination, and vancomycin can be as noted above for 4 weeks. If the enterococci again penicillin G plus gentamicin, you may have ampicillin 2 gram plus gentamicin both for 4 to 6 weeks. You can give vancomycin plus gentamicin for 4 to 6 weeks. Streptococci methicillin susceptible infective native valves if there are no foreign devices. Then we have a choices of nefcillin or oxacillin plus gentamicin or cefazolin plus gentamicin or vancomycin alone for 4 to 6 weeks. Then comes the MRSA, methicillin resistant infecting native valves. If there is no foreign device, we can give vancomycin. If there is a prosthetic device, we can give nefcillin or oxacillin plus gentamicin and plus rifampicin. We can also give vancomycin as well plus gentamicin in combination plus rifampicin. If the Hisic organisms are involved, we have two options, either ceftriaxone or ampicillin plus sulbactam combination for 4 weeks. Conditions to be met for the short course treatment of Streptococcus viridans and Streptococcus bovis endocarditis. So if we have a patient with a native valve infection, we can give short course of antibiotic therapy. If the minimum inhibitory concentration is less than or equal to 0.1 milligram per liter, again we can have a short course. If there are no adverse prognostic factors, for example, heart failure, aortic regurgitation, or there are conduction defects, if these things are absent, we can give a short course of treatment. If there is no evidence of thromboembolism, again we can have a short course. And if the vegetation, no vegetations of more than 5 mm diameter, that is less than 5 mm diameter, we again can have a short course of treatment. And if we get a response within 7 days of treatment, we can again short course of treatment for Streptococcus viridans and bovis endocarditis. What are the indications for cardiac surgery in infective endocarditis? Heart failure due to valve damage, failure of antibiotic therapy, we have a persistent uncontrolled infection. The vegetation is large. On left side, heart valves are involved with evidence of high risk of systemic emboli. If there are abscesses formation, if Staph aureus endocarditis is there, and we can have a surgery to prevent systemic emboli and periventricular infection. If there is periventricular infection, we should go for cardiac surgery in a selected cases. Talking about prevention, patients with valvular or congenital heart disease may be susceptible to infective endocarditis, and these individuals should be made aware of the risk of endocarditis, the need to avoid bacteremia, and the importance of maintaining good dental health. Invasive procedures that may cause transient bacteremia should be completed and accompanied by appropriate antibiotic prophylaxis. So if the patient has a high risk cardiac lesions for which endocarditis prophylaxis is advised before dental procedures, that are prosthetic heart valve, if there is a previous episode of endocarditis, if the unrepaired cyanotic congenital heart disease is there, including palliative shunts or conduits, completely repaired congenital heart defects during the 6 months after repair, incompletely repaired congenital heart disease with residual defects adjacent to prosthetic material, valvopathy developing after cardiac transplantation. If the patient is high risk, as we discussed, then prophylaxis is recommended. In prosthetic valves, in previous endocarditis, and again repetition, the complex cyanotic congenital heart disease, the surgical constructed systemic pulmonary shunts. Then comes the moderate risk. If the patient has congenital heart disease except as valvular stenosis, in which there are less chances, at least mild aortic insufficiency, at least moderate mitral regurgitation or tricuspid regurgitation, and thickened mitral valves with at least mild mitral regurgitation. If the patient is having a hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, again moderate risk. If there is a mitral valve prolapse with regurgitation or thickening leaflets, again there is a moderate risk of endocarditis. And what if there is a negligible risk? If there is isolated secundum arterial septal defect, there is surgical repair of ASD, VSD or PDA without residual beyond 6 months, previous coronary artery bypass grafting, mitral valve prolapse without mitral regurgitation or thickened leaflet, physiological functional or innocent heart murmurs, previous rheumatic fever without valvular dysfunction, pacemakers and implanted defibrillators. Dental procedures. Endocarditis prophylaxis is recommended. So, talking about the dental and oral procedures likely to cause significant bleeding, periodontal surgery, scaling, and professional teeth cleaning, intraligamentary oral local anesthetic injections, respiratory tract surgical operations that involve respiratory mucosa, bronchoscopy with a rigid bronchoscope, and tonsillectomy or adenodectomy. These all procedures requires endocarditis prophylaxis and it is recommended. Then talking about the procedures, GI tract, sclerotherapy for esophageal varices, yes, prophylaxis is recommended. Esophageal stricture dilatation, endoscopic retrograde cholangiography with biliary reduction, biliary tract surgery, surgical operations that involve intestinal mucosa, genitourinary tract surgeries, prosthetic surgeries, cystoscopy, and many others. And CN drainage even of uninfected tissue requires endocarditis prophylaxis. So, what antibiotic regimes for prophylaxis of endocarditis in adults with high risk cardiac lesions? Standard oral regime is amoxicillin 2 gram per oral 1 hour before procedure. If there is an inability to take oral medication somehow, if the dental issue is there, then you may have go for ampicillin 2 gram IV or IM within 1 hour before procedure. If the patient is penicillin allergic, you can give clarithromycin or azithromycin 500 mg per oral 1 hour before procedure. Cephalexin 2 gram per oral 1 hour before procedure. Clindamycin 600 mg per oral 1 hour before procedure. And again, if the allergy and inability to take oral medication, you can have a cefazolin or ceftriaxone 1 gram IV or IM 30 minutes before procedure. Clindamycin 600 mg IV or IM 1 hour before procedure. Thank you.